and welcome to Keep the Channel Open, a podcast featuring conversations with artists, writers, and curators. My name is Mike Sakasagawa, and this is episode 58. Today's guest is Linda Alterwitz. Hey there, folks. How's everybody doing this week? I wanted to talk a little bit about something I've been thinking about. Maybe you'll find it useful. I don't know. Anyway, I've been working on this short story for several months now. And when I say working, I mean that I've been thinking about it really hard, which is to say, not actually working on it at all. I've been having a really hard time just sort of putting pen to paper, actually getting started. And I was trying to figure out what exactly is stopping me. So I had been thinking that it had to do with a fear of not being able to do it well. And I think I actually mentioned that in a past episode, which gives you an idea of how long I've been twiddling my thumbs on this story. But anyway, the other day I heard this line from another writer, and I can't remember whether I read it or heard it on a podcast or even who it was, but basically the person was saying that they're kind of like a dictator when it comes to the stories they write, that they control every aspect of what happens to each character. And I got to thinking that maybe what the real block for me when it comes to fiction or really to any kind of construction in art is that some part of me doesn't want the responsibility of being that kind of a dictator, Like, I just don't want to be the person who says how it's going to turn out. And it's strange too, because I have no real trouble making stuff, like even stuff that turns out bad, as long as I'm observing something from the world instead of inventing it. Like a photograph, a poem, an essay, all of that seems not to bother me, which when I stop and think about it is strange, right? Because in all of these cases, I actually do have all of the responsibility for what the piece actually ends up being. It's not actually true that I'm just taking something that already exists. What I'm doing when I make a photograph or write an essay, I'm building something, even if what I'm building is referring to something from the real world, I'm the one making the choices of what goes in, what doesn't go in, of what it looks like, how it sounds, all of that stuff. It's almost like what I'm doing is tricking myself into thinking that when I make a photograph or a poem or something, that the responsibility is outside of myself. And that seems to maybe be a useful realization, like maybe I can figure out how to trick myself into writing without that reference, now that I know that that's what's going on. I'm kind of interested to know if any of you folks ever have to trick yourself into working and, why and how. So hit me up on Twitter at ChannelOpenPod or email me at podcast@keepthechanneleopen.com. Love to hear from you. On to the show. Today's guest is Linda Alterwitz. Linda is a photographic artist whose work embraces science and technology to expose the fragility and fascination of our bodies. Her creative process often incorporates images derived from X-rays, CAT scans, PET scans, sonograms, or MRI diagnostic imaging, informational grids sourced from the results of medical tests, or thermal imaging, and her work has been exhibited in the United States, Japan, Spain, Israel, and Poland. Now, I first met Linda about 3 years ago when we took a workshop together, which not only was that a great experience in and of itself, but it also led to us collaborating along with the other students in the class on a group portfolio that has managed to make its way into a few collections around the U.S. And I only mention that just to say that, it's always good to take the opportunity to meet new artists because you never know what might come of it. Anyway, Linda's work has stuck with me ever since I saw it back in 2015. It's both visually striking and conceptually profound. It invites you to consider what it means to be a human being. So I was very happy to get the chance to talk with her. I put some links in the show notes to the bodies of her work that we talked about in our conversation, and I encourage you to check those out. Also, if you're in the Las Vegas area, Linda will have work in a group exhibition at the Marjorie Barrick Museum of Art at UNLV. The title of the exhibition is Plural, and it's open from February 2nd to May 12th with a reception on February 9th from 5 to 9 p.m. It looks like a really interesting show, so do check that out if you can. Okay. So then, without further ado, let's get started. As always, if you'd like to join in the conversation, you can use the hashtag ChannelOpenPod on Twitter. And now here's my conversation with Linda Alterwitz. I was just thinking about, what I always like to do before I talk to everyone is sort of think about the first time I ever encountered someone's work. So with you, it would have been in 2015. We took a class together with Mary Virginia Swanson in Tucson.
Master marketing class, I believe it was.
Yes. I met so many people in that class. I
It's a great group of people.
Yeah. But I think that was, if I recall correctly, that was right around the time that your book was coming out, While I Am Still. Is that right? I think you presented it to the class.
I think I had my mid-career retrospective shortly, right, that was going on at that time, I believe.
Yeah.
So the book came out. It was a limited edition of 250, and it came out, just a couple months before that class with Mary Virginia Swanson.
Yeah. I remember being really sort of taken with your work when you showed us that book. I don't remember if the book that you brought was a mock-up or if it was the final copy. But there was something about it. I don't know. It just, as an object, it was really nice, but also nice is kind of a dumb word to use. But I remember, of course, the first thing that jumps out about your work is the way that you use technology as the way that your work is sort of interested in technology, and the way that you sort of mix art and science.
Right.
So when I was thinking about that While I Am Still work, I took the opportunity to sort of revisit it a little bit before we talked, and one of the things that I was thinking is that the way that you make your work is obviously very rooted in the processes that you're using.
Yes.
But it never strikes me that it's actually about the process. Would you say that's true?
No, I don't think. I think some of my projects are more about process, but I think the work from While I'm Still is not about process. It's about finding that middle ground between art and science, summoning the unexpected, finding that one point where a piece is completed, where art and science come together to mean something else to different people. So not so much about process, it's about the final conclusion of the piece, that moment in time. I think that's more what it's about for that work.
I saw in your statement, I don't remember if it was in your bio or in the statement for that particular project, but there was something about that you'd been inspired by seeing an MRI scan of your own brain, and then that was sort of an aha moment for you. Is that right?
I think so. It changed that experience that I had, changed the way that changed my art. I had been a painter for 20 years, got my master's in painting and drawing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I'd been doing that for about 2 decades. And it wasn't until I got a brain tumor that it changed my life. You know, not to make light of making lemonade out of something. I think that's too easy of a way to put it. But well, it's a good story. I'll tell it. It's actually a really good story, and I think other people could relate to the outcome of this. I was going for MRIs of my brain every 3 months to see if it's shrinking or growing, and I get my film. My doctor at Cedars-Sinai liked to see the film, and one time I brought the film. And he looked at it and he said, "What's up with this? The numbers are this, and then the growth is this. This doesn't make sense. What's going on here? Did you go to the same diagnostic center? Is it the same machine?" I go, "No, they sent me somewhere else." He goes, "Oh, okay, take these home and come back, get another MRI and come back here, fly back." And so that's what I did. And I didn't immediately put these set of MRIs onto my light box at home, but they eventually made their way there. And when I started looking at the insides of my brain, I started seeing it differently. That was me, and there's like this marker, circling a tumor in there. And it just was kind of, it woke me up a little bit. But I didn't start doing work about it right away, but eventually it started creeping into the work. And my first piece using medical imagery was of my own brain. And it was of this red tree, a red bush in the East Coast. I was traveling, and then one side of the image was completely black, and then one side had this red tree and this lush landscape with the MRI of my brain kind of infused over it, layered over it. And it was so, like having the black on one side of my brain, it just, that moment, it went to that moment of the science and the technology and my own emotions. And the first year of making work was like a healing process for me. And then it became more universal. People related to it. I started using more medical technology, PET scans, the positron emission technology, any kind of medical imagery I can use, I did. So it started changing when people they related to it. It was more of a universal feeling than just my own feelings of healing. And that's why I continued with it, because I was doing something that I think was helping other people. And it helped me. And it was curious. And it kind of extends beyond the boundaries of experience, thought, and aesthetics. It transformed. I think the work is transformative.
So I agree with you, by the way. One of the things that I was sort of wondering in looking at these images is whether the medical imagery so in this series you're sort of layering or juxtaposing medical imagery with other images like landscapes or interiors or things like that.
Yes.
And
mostly landscape.
Mostly landscapes, yeah. There was a couple that I saw, like it looked like
there was a couple,
like a sofa or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was sort of wondering, just to begin with, whether the medical images are ones that were images that you created using that technology, or were they ones that were sort of more found, or like other people's actual medical imaging?
Other people's actual medical imaging. And they are friends, families. People would come to me and donate images and say, here, do something with this. So yes.
Because it's interesting. I never really think of medical imaging as something that would have much in the way of gesture to it. But a lot of these images, that's such an integral part of the image is some... there's some human connection that we can see in body language that it's just not something that would have occurred to me you would find in a medical image,
Yeah. What's interesting is what you're usually looking on isn't so expressive. It's just you, as an artist, or, looking at it visually, I have to connect with that emotion and try to find which image can give that emotion, even though it's not really doing that in the medical imagery itself.
Yeah.
It's just appearing that way.
Yeah. So then another thing that I was thinking about too is, is looking through several of your bodies of work, sort of coming back to them, both the newer one that you were showing me recently at Medium, but also some of the older ones that you'd presented at the class that we took. That so the ones that I was sort of focusing on were While I'm Still, Just Breathe, and Signatures of Heat. And one of the things that really struck me about this was that you have a lot of your work is very focused on some connection with the body. It always seems to come back to a connection with the body. And there's something really resonant about that to me, but I was sort of wondering where that is for you.
Why I'm connected with the body?
Well, I guess like
the image.
Like the work seems to me, there's something about the work that is like in While I Am Still, you're really explicitly taking images of the body and combining them with images of land or of place or other objects, and it seems to me to sort of imply a connection, that you're actually creating a connection in the image between the two different images that you're blending. And there's something really fascinating to me about that. And then when I was thinking about a series like Just Breathe, where you're looking at the stars and as sort of mediated by the motion of a person breathing, that again, you're taking something very specific about a specific person's body and sort of really explicitly making this connection between what's in the body and what's outside of the body. And I don't know, I found that really fascinating the more I thought about it. Does that sort of help?
Yeah. I think I'm always taking the scientific part of being human versus the ethereal and taking that contrast and playing them against each other. So the scientific part, I'm always using medical imagery, most all the time, except for Just Breathe, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then with the ethereal, I try to get a sense of comfort and relaxation, and I find comfort with nature. And that's why most of the time the natural landscape is part of my work. With Just Breathe, I didn't use medical imagery, but what I did is it was a participatory project where I would put the camera, a digital camera, someone would lay down on the ground. It was started off at nighttime, but ended up when I did the residency at Mayo Clinic, we did a daytime. But a 30-second exposure, and you breathe with the camera on your chest and the camera open and documenting the stars above or the trees, whatever is above the camera. So if it's stars, the stars will oscillate, and usually an adult's breath in about a minute, you breathe about 5 times. So it's got like 5 little squiggly marks or circles or however your breath is. So it was science in a way, because it's really documenting your breath, documenting that you are alive, you are here, more of a Zen kind of moment as the literal medical imagery. So that there's a little bit of difference. But after doing the project while I'm still, it was so intense for me, working with friends and families, scans. I really needed a respite. I needed something calming and soothing. And I got away from the medical imagery per se and just focused on breathing and being in the moment. So, and then I went right back to the medical imagery right after that. I was ready again.
It's really interesting because I feel like, when I was thinking about with those two bodies of work, there's something about it where, like with Just Breathe, the way that you describe it in your artist statement as sort of a signature, like that everybody's breathing pattern comes out just a little bit different, and there's something sort of unique in each one.
Oh, there is.
And then with While I Am Still, oftentimes with the medical imagery, because of the way that the images are created, whether it's X-rays or PET scans or CAT scans or whatever, that the sort of personal details are sort of more obscured. I thought there was something really interesting about sort of a tension, and this actually seemed to go into your more recent work too, the thermal imaging, the signatures of heat imaging, where there's some tension between sort of a uniqueness and a universalness, and how, like each of us is very separate from one another, but also very much the same. There's something in that.
I think that theme runs throughout. It's run throughout my work for over 12 years. That is the crux of my work, especially from the work Once Ocean. And it's everything. My work is really based around that, the connectivity of all things.
Yeah. So with the newer work, the Signatures of Heat, here you're taking infrared images, and you're and many of them, not all of them. The ones you were showing at Medium were mostly of human bodies. And, the first thing that jumped out at me, I remember saying this to you when you were showing me the prints, that the figures in your images almost sort of look like, classical marble statues. And they're very beautiful. There's something really sort of almost pristine about the way the figures are presented. But then, and there again, one of the things you talk about in your statement is how many of the details of the individual get removed, but that you're still left with the gesture. And there again, it just seemed so, I don't know, there's something, I really enjoyed that work.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think what I love about the concept of that work is that the commonalities of that work unite us. What it shows is the breath, the sweat, inflammation, and the warm circulation of blood. Mm-hmm. That's all revealed in the thermal imaging. But what it leaves out and what's hidden from our view are the physical characteristics that really socially divide us. Pigmentation, tattoos, hair color, and age and gender are blurred as well. So I love that whole idea of what's revealed and what's concealed, and kind of a better world. Yeah. A better world through the eyes of heat.
Infrared imaging is something that I feel like, it's not a strictly, like there are other photographers that have used infrared, whether it's an infrared conversion to a regular, maybe digital SLR or infrared film in the old days. There's something about infrared that is been used before, but I find the way that you do it is quite novel. It doesn't, like, usually I feel like when you see infrared images, it's often done in a really gimmicky way where it's really just there to sort of change the color palette of an image that would have otherwise been just a sort of normal image, but where with yours is very like you couldn't have it come out any other way. You couldn't approach this project without that.
Well, this is really thermal imaging. This is total heat, where you can take a photograph of somebody in a room with no light in it. It will come out the same as if there were light in the room. So it's a little different than infrared photography.
Right. Right.
Yeah, totally different technology. I love this process. I love working with the technology.
How did you find your way into this? Because it's a little different from the medical imaging. It's similar, but also a little different. So how did you sort of find your way there?
It's the same concept as seeing unseen, seeing what others can't see, like medical imagery. So it's kind of similar, but different. How did I find it? Well, it's a funny story that my husband was watching a series of something on TV called Cops, and they were showing a helicopter. The helicopter had an thermal camera, and what they were showing was a dog chasing a man in pitch black. And he called me over because he knows that's kind of imagery I just love. And from that point, I said, okay, I've got to find this camera. I've got to be able to do some things with this camera, see what it can do. So it kind of found me, but it was really the same concept. I kind of repeat myself using different technology, different tools, different series of work, but it's really one step leads to another, within all my work.
It's something I always really love because it's always something where, this thermal work is visually very different from the other, the signatures of heat work looks very different visually from While I Am Still, but at the end of the day, it's still, you're the same artist. It's all sort of filtering through you in the same way. I really love when you're able to see a progression, or when you're able to sort of see that sort of, the hand of the artist in there. I don't know. There's something about that.
Thank you. It's all about human experience, about our connectivity to other humans and everything on this planet. And I love that it summons like the unexpected. That's what I love about finding that aha moment is the unexpected for me.
Yeah. So There's something about science and art that, a lot of people would sort of feel like, aren't an obvious fit for one another, that in many cases they're even just rhetorically held up as opposites to one another.
No, it's what makes us tick as humans. It's what we're made of, is parts of science, parts of art. It's what makes us complete as humans, in my opinion.
So another thing too, you are the art and science editor for LensScratch.
Yes.
And you do that, is that once a year or twice a year that you do that?
Twice a year. I do 2 weeks a year.
Yeah. So as in that role, you're acting more as a curator than as an artist. And I was sort of wondering, what that experience is like for you.
I love to promote other artists. And when I find work that I just love, I try to pull it into, the theme that I'm working on that week. And it sheds more light on the artist for me. And I really get to know that person's work more than just looking at it for, 15, 20 minutes, looking at their website or their work. I really delve into it, and it's good for them, and it informs me too. So I love writing. I think it's really magical.
Do you find that the writing informs, like the process of writing informs your visual work as well?
When I write about my own work, yeah, if I'm stuck or something, I'll write and write and write, and sometimes it gives me an avenue to go down. So it does inform sometimes. I think it's very healthy to write about your work, and especially when you get to a place where you're not quite sure where you're going, and I do that quite a bit.
It's one of those things I feel like, as visual artists, a lot of times people sort of, it's a stumbling point for a lot of visual artists, the talking about it or the writing about it, or, even being able to think about it in terms of words. I always personally find it very useful to be able to do that, but I know some people tend to almost bristle at the idea that people need to do it, but it sounds like that's not the case for you, that it's more... For
me it helps me take it to the next level.
Yeah.
I was just recently have a new body of work out called Superpowers. I'm going to be showing it in the next couple of days at Photonola.
Cool.
And I'm real excited about it. But I didn't know how to talk about it. I knew what the work was about, but I couldn't talk about it. So I spent about a week writing about this work. And finally I got the statement done, and now I'm comfortable, and it all clicked. After I got the statement in my head, down on paper, everything clicked. A real useful tool for me, and for my understanding of other people's work as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's the same thing for me. Oftentimes, it's really just that process of being able to get the words in a place where I can actually physically see them is often very enlightening.
And to be able to ask the artist, questions about their work. Why this, or what about this? And to be informed on another level. It's wonderful. I get so much more information, and it's just a great experience writing for LensScratch, and I love LensScratch, so truly support the magazine.
Yeah, we all love LensScratch.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we take a quick little break, and then we can come back and do the second segment. So for the second segment, I always invite the guest to bring a topic of their own, and it can be whatever you'd like to talk about, anything that's on your mind. So what would you like to talk about today?
I would like to talk about balance in life, because that's something that really dictates my work, my life, and it's really important to me. And I think it is important to a lot of people.
It's something that's certainly elusive for a lot of people. I think a lot of people would like to be able to find more of it, but
it's definitely something you have to work toward finding, because life is, goes up and down in waves. You have good times, you have bad, but when you have a real good time, or when you have a real bad time, you got to bring it up. When you have a bad time, a good time, it is eventually going to come down, but you have to work on that. And I think that's how it informs my art, the good and the bad, and finding that balance. And I think the art-science connection really has to do with balance for me, keeping balance, using both sides of my brain, the right brain, the left brain, the logical, and the creative, and finding that place where I can be at peace.
I think that, it's interesting because there's a lot of different kinds of balance, and even just now you've mentioned, I don't know, 2 or 3 different ones, balancing the logical and the creative, balancing art and science, balancing the 2 sides of your brain, balancing the good and the bad. For me, the thing I often think about with balance is about time, about how I spend my time.
Right.
Oftentimes I find myself, my time is so filled or overfilled often, and that I have trouble sort of, it can be a little overwhelming at times. Yeah. So that is the kind of balance that I'm always trying to work on is balancing, sort of responsibilities, the different responsibilities that I might have with the balancing, being able to enjoy myself with executing my responsibilities and spending time with the different parts of my life. I think that's something that in this sort of day and age, a lot of us have trouble with.
Yeah, I think it affects everybody. And even in the work that I do, where science and technology are tempered, balanced by the art and nature. So it's these 2 sides that kind of like pull me one side, pull me the other. If I'm too left-brained, if I'm too logical, I'm so off. I'm not in a good mood. If I get too right-sided, I'm not getting things done. So I need, for me, this is just me, I need to have that right balance, the correct balance between the 2. And it's in that place where I can create art.
Do you find that there's like a certain method that works for you to be able to find that when you feel like you're tipping too much to one side or the other?
It's a daily thing. Yeah, I actually like to work out every single day, and that helps me balance my body. Mm-hmm. It balances not only my body but my mind. Just a good sweat for 30, 40 minutes, I'm good. So that's one method that I use to keep myself balanced.
Yeah. For me, I often find that rather than balance, it's I almost feel, like if I think about a seesaw, it's rather than the seesaw being flat, I tend to see myself as sort of oscillating from one side to the other. Right. A lot of things, even with my different sort of creative practices, I am a photographer, but also I'm a writer. And I find that a lot of times I'll spend several months at a time doing one or the other, but interestingly though, the times when I'm able to actually synthesize those 2 sort of aspects of myself are, I think, when the work tends to be the most interesting. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I've never quite managed the trick of being able to do that on purpose, of bringing things together on purpose. It's almost sort of has to happen when I'm not paying attention. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of interesting that my work has been based on the art and science, which stems from when I was completely off balance, with a brain tumor, I was off balance. But that is what really started me down this path of art and science. So It's kind of interesting. It does fuel the art when you're a little off balance.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and what I'm thinking about now is that many of the sort of projects that I have worked on for myself, a lot of times each project sort of starts in a moment of imbalance, and that is sort of what motivates me to want to make the work, even if I'm not aware that I'm at the time that I'm making a new body of work, but that the process of making a new body of work often helps me sort of come to terms with whatever, emotional thing I'm trying to resolve. So maybe like through the process of doing the work is how I can find balance in some of those ways.
Yeah, I think that's true for me too. I mean, I'm not always in balance. That's by no means me, but at least I think it's an awareness of if the seesaw is tipping too far one way, even if that's for 3 months. Okay, time to get back on the other side. It's that it doesn't have to be daily. It could be every 3 or 6 months, but the awareness that there needs to be some kind of balance to get everything done.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting that times of imbalance give us the best work.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, it's just so much that the imbalance oftentimes brings a certain sort of tension or distress even, and that the need to resolve that is sort of what ends up motivating me to make the work.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Maybe I'm off balance so much. I'm just so aware of it.
I think
back on balance, though. Linda.
It's hard to, you say like having awareness, but I find for a lot of people, and certainly even for myself, being able to be mindful of what is actually going on with myself, that can be a really tricky thing to do. I feel like, I don't know about other people, but I feel like I can be very good at sort of fooling myself into things,
Yeah. I used to always be about 6 months behind myself of knowing what was going on. Now I'm a little more up to date.
Yeah. I think that is something that's really valuable for me, at least about the artistic process, is that I feel like coming to understand my creative processes has sort of led me to a better understanding of sort of my underlying emotional processes. So I don't know. I hopefully it's true anyway. Yeah. I don't know. It is something that we're all sort of striving for, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Striving for, that's a better word.
Yeah. So, sort of the last question that I usually ask everyone is whether there is a piece of art or literature or just general creativity that you've experienced recently that meant something to you.
Yes. I really fell in love with the work of Richard Mosse. I'm not sure how to say his last name. M-O-S-S-E? Mosse? Yeah. He does the thermal work, refugees. Love the work, love the scale, love the technology, and how he uses thermal work to show social issues, current social issues, and expose them. Yeah, I pretty much fell in love with that work. Yeah, I think he did that last year. And having worked with thermal imaging for a few years, seeing that work, I was just inspired by what he did. Just amazing work.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I'll have to look that up. That sounds really pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's huge, large-scale pieces that it's just beautiful. Yeah.
Where did you happen to see this?
Gosh, online I saw something. The gallery had his work.
It is one of those things where, especially with large-scale work, I always. It's tough to get out to where it is, but I always sort of wonder what I'm missing out by,
not seeing it in person.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Sure. I would love to see this in person.
Yeah.
One day. Hopefully.
One day. All right. Well, thanks very much for talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for talking with me.
Okay, so as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you're in the Las Vegas area, do check out the Plural exhibition at the Marjorie Barrick Museum of Art at UNLV, where you can see some of Linda's work. The show runs from February 2nd through May 12th. And that is our show. If you'd like to get in touch, you can find all of the show's contact and social media info in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, a monthly pledge in any amount to our Patreon campaign is greatly appreciated. You can find that at patreon.com/sakeriver. That's sake like the drink and river like river. Our theme music is provided by Poddington Bear. You can find more of his music available for licensing at soundofpicture.com. Our next episode features a conversation with photographer Justina Bada, and that will be coming on February 14th. Until then, remember, keep the channel open.